everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And Wes, the 2024 Packers rookie minicamp is in the books. It took place last weekend. The rookies arriving on Thursday, practices on Friday and Saturday, lots of meetings, orientation stuff, playbook stuff, find your way around the building stuff. But the rookies have gotten their introduction to the Green Bay Packers and how business is conducted here. What were your overall impressions when you came away from the weekend?
On Saturday evening, I was gathering my thoughts after we got done with practice. I was working on Insider Inbox and finishing up our 5 Things story, and I was just sitting at my desk. It was very quiet, and I actually ended up tweeting this too. It hit me that, in my opinion, I've covered these going back to 2011, I believe. I helped out on it the first time. And that was one of the most, if not the most competitive rookie minicamp, or if you go back to the McCarthy era rookie orientation, that I'd been a part of. I felt just like there were so many young guys that made plays. And certainly we can talk about the inside linebackers and the speed and the vocality of the safety position. But there were undrafted free agents. There were tryout guys. A few of them ended up getting signed to the roster that I felt like really captured the moment. And Matt LaFleur set the tone for this on Friday evening when he said, we're trying to do our walkthrough, and these guys, we're trying to pull them back a little bit, because I think what you had this mesh between rookie draft picks that want to impress and are taking their job very serious. A guy like Kalen King was actually talking about, hey, I'm going to be the most competitive player on the field, and those guys lived up to that. But then you also had the undrafted free agents trying to make an impression. You also had the tryout guys trying to earn a job. And with those 50 players that were out there on the field on Friday and Saturday, I just felt, from an overall structural standpoint, it was one of the more competitive, organized mini camps that I'd been a part of on the rookie front.
Yeah, it seemed, Matt LaFleur talks a lot about energy and whatnot at practice, and there was certainly no lack of that with these young guys on the field. I want to get your impressions, particularly of the draft picks. It's the first time we actually get to see them in person. They put on a Packer jersey, put on a Packer helmet. Granted, it's not in pads, it's not a full NFL uniform. But other than the college film and whatnot, this is that's all we've gotten to see of these guys to this point. And if I were to pick out one guy from the draft class that just from a physical sense stood out to me, I think I would have to say it's Edgerrin Cooper. And it's not because Edgerrin Cooper is some massively ripped huge guy, whatever. That's not what I mean. It's that Edgerrin Cooper, when Brian Gutekunst talked about having these off-ball inside linebackers having some length to be able to play in space, take a look at Edgerrin Cooper, and that's the definition of length at the linebacker position. He's got a wingspan. I mean, long arms. You can see through the legs and the torso. He's long, but at the same time, he's 230 pounds and he can run like the wind. I mean, there's a physical presence, even though he's not some 300-pound guy, or he's not some 275-pound edge rusher. There's a physical presence to Edgerrin Cooper when you see him on the field, and that's what really stood out to me.
Yeah, and to kind of bring it back to what I was saying about the inside linebackers and the safety group, when they did some of the 7-on-7 stuff, when they did a little bit of the team stuff they did, whether it was Cooper, whether it was Tyron Hopper, Tyron Hopper is listed at 6'2", 229, I believe. He looks like a full-grown man, though, and I felt like, and he was even working some of the mic stuff there, too, both of those guys getting some of those reps. I just felt like, here's the thing, Michael, it's a rookie camp, but you do want to see your draft picks be the ones that sort of catch your eye.
Yeah, absolutely.
Setting. And I felt like both Cooper and Hopper did that. From Cooper's perspective, the number one thing you saw, in addition to the speed, was his ability to collapse and his decisiveness to the ball carrier. I felt like there was that aggressiveness and that mindset. You could tell that it's not something that he tries to play with. He just does play that way. And I feel like that's going to be really valuable for them. And when you threw that question out there about which rookies caught my eye, that definitely starts for Evan Williams for me. I was there on Saturday for that practice, and just seeing where Evan Williams how vocal he was on the back end. There was no timidity with that safety group and those defensive backs. Guys were communicating. Now, it's going to be a lot different when it's Rashawn Gary on the field and Kenny Clark and Jair Alexander, Xavier McKinney. But in that moment, those guys were being asked to be the commanders of this defense, and I felt like they really did that. And the amount of guys crashing to the line of scrimmage, this was the first time we saw Jeff Hafley's version of a 4-3 in the base system. And I just felt like, listening to Hafley talk on Monday as well, he wants these guys to play confident. He doesn't want them to have to think about things. And even though it was just their first orientation into this thing, they still have a lot to learn with this playbook. I just came away so impressed by that group, and specifically those inside linebackers being able to manage all of that chaos in what can be a very busy 3 days.
Yeah, going back to Hopper for a second, Tyron Hopper from Missouri. Again, for me, the reaction I had was reflecting on a comment from Brian Gutekunst during the draft. The comment that stood out to me the most after the selection of Hopper was he said, this is a defender, this is a linebacker who's got stopping power. And when you look at his body type on the field, then you see exactly what Gutekunst is talking about. Because yes, Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper essentially play the same position, but they are two very, very different body types in terms of how they look on the field. And that description of stopping power with Hopper, now we didn't get to actually see like hits and tackles and things that we're going to see in the preseason games coming up in August, but you can see that he has the body, and I understand where that comment came from, from Brian Gutekunst. That's someone who has not, watched a whole ton of film on these guys, from their college careers.
When you can pack that punch at 232 is the difference as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a 255-pound linebacker who's going to lay the wood with all of that extra weight. He's 230 pounds because he can still run in the 4.5s.
And as Jeff Hafley said, I mean, that's just the way this thing has gone. You need those guys to be able to cover. You're just not going to be able to have those plotters that are just filling gaps like you were maybe in 1989. I think the Packers, again, they factor in. Those guys go right in with Isaiah McDuffie. They go right in with Quay Walker here in 2 weeks, and they'll let that competition play out. But when you're looking at day 2 picks and that investment that Green Bay made, I felt like you saw some of those initial returns.
Well, the other thing I'm wondering is which one of us is going to be the first to call them Hooper and Copper instead of Copper.
Inevitably,
Hooper
it will happen.
And Hopper. It's going to happen at
probably
some
in
point.
a 3 things.
But anyway, but also following up on what you said about Evan Williams and his vocal presence on the field, the communication aspect of it. I was chatting with him during the open locker room when we got a chance to ask some of the rookie draft picks questions and whatnot. And interestingly, I hadn't realized this until he brought it up. Obviously, he was a transfer from transferred to Oregon for his final season. But he mentioned over the course of his college career, he had 4 different defensive coordinators. Yeah. So this is a young man who knows what it's like to have to learn a new system, to have to jump in, figure things out early and quickly, and take that leadership role at the safety position, maybe with some new terminology, et cetera, et cetera. Now he's going through that process in the NFL, but it seems that his the way his college career went kind of sets him up to be a guy who can figure some of this stuff out in the NFL rather quickly.
Yeah, and I don't like drawing comparisons. I know it's a difficult thing, and you don't want to set the bar too high for some of these guys when they're just getting their feel for the first time. But the thing I was so impressed by him out there was there was, and I said it to a number of different guys, there was a Micah Hyde type feel to him in terms of just not only his body type, but just the way he looks so confident. And I think when you're looking at a guy that the Packers moved up to draft in that 4th round, you want to find somebody that is a difference maker and is going to contribute to this thing. And one of the points I made in Insider Inbox was, it was a really sound investment when you look at it from, you really can't go wrong with drafting safeties to the level that the Packers did, considering what their need was at the position. Because not only are you looking for a starter next to Xavier McKinney, you're looking for a guy that can be there behind Keyshawn Nixon They need another 6th defensive back, a position that really, for the most part, Jonathan Owens handled most of last season.
Right.
Special teams also has value for them. Katan Oladipo, that could be a situation when he comes back from this toe injury, he could factor into that. It's 6'1", 216 pounds. And Williams is game for all of it, no matter how it works out. One other point I want to make, too, in addition to the changeover for him with the defensive coordinator, I was looking this up. I forgot about this when we were talking to him a little bit. He played for Jeff Tedford twice at Fresno State. Tedford was the guy that got him there in 19, stepped away for a couple of years. I think he had some personal stuff, maybe some health stuff, and he came back in 2020 too. So he actually played for him both as a freshman and a senior, and then obviously made that transition to Oregon. So when it comes to making adjustments, working on the fly, this is a smart kid that has kind of dealt with that before.
Yeah, and quickly, before we move on from the safeties, I wanted to get your thoughts, what your first impression was of Javon Bullard, the second-round pick out of Georgia, because if I were to sum up my first impression of him in one word, it would be smooth.
Yeah.
There is a fluidity, there is a smoothness to his movements when he is out there, whether he's sort of playing the deep center field or whether he's a little closer to the line of scrimmage. There's certain guys that just look a certain way. There's a smoothness to their movements, and that's what caught my eye with Bullard.
And I liked when I was asking the athlete about that, when he very pronouncedly said thick. When you look at his frame as well. I mean, this is not a guy that is giving up size for his speed. It all ties together, and he's been a blue chip athlete from the very beginning. And in this incarnation of the Georgia football program, it's 4- and 5-star guys competing for starting roles. And Bullard went through that. He started in the slot for a year in the nickel star position. Then he came back and he ended up being the true safety last year. And the Packers, I think, can feel confident that wherever he settles in, this is a guy that could potentially go right away. It is going to be fascinating in a couple weeks with OTAs, what Green Bay decides to do at that safety position. Because you have Anthony Johnson Jr. coming back as well, also Zane Anderson. But in a lot of ways, it could be set up much like in 2019, where that first OTA practice, it was Adrian Amos and it was Darnell Savage. Right. The unrestricted free agent big signing in the first-round pick. It could very well work out that same way too with Bullard.
Yeah, I kind of think that's where things are going to start, but of course, it's also not about where you start; it's where you finish, and we'll have to see how that evolves. Want to get your thoughts on some other guys as well. But some sponsor business first. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. First-round draft pick, Jordan Morgan. He was getting his snaps at left tackle, as Matt LaFleur had promised. That's where they're going to start him. I'll be curious to see just where this goes, because my first impression on Morgan is that he looks the part. Mm-hmm. And for all the talk about well, is he going to play tackle? Is he going to play guard? He's capable of, projected as being capable of playing both at the NFL level. I think he looks like a tackle, but just to caution everybody, there was a guy 15 years ago who was drafted by the Green Bay Packers in the 4th round, a guy named T.J. Lang. Mm-hmm. And there was all the talk when he was drafted. Is he going to be a tackle? Is he going to be a guard? He played mostly tackle at Eastern Michigan. I thought T.J. Lang looked like a tackle. I was like, this guy's going to be an edge blocker. He's going to make his money there in the NFL. And he started out playing a fair amount of tackle when he was subbing in, because he wasn't a starter right away in his career. Well, lo and behold, T.J. Lang ended up being quite a darn good guard in the NFL for a long time for both the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. So take my analysis for what it's worth, but I'll be interested to see where this goes with Morgan, because there's a lot of body and there's a lot of talent to work with there with the new number 77.
Yeah, and give yourself a little bit of grace there too, because I thought Adam Stenovich made a really salient point when he was talking to the media on Monday, and that David Bakhtiari, his opportunity came at left tackle, because Brian Bulaga went down with the ACL. If Brian doesn't go down with the ACL, maybe Dave stays at right tackle, like he was sort of trending towards, that he was going to take over that spot, maybe even inside, as some people had projected him. But that's just the way things went. It's a lot of times about what the opportunity is. With all due respect to TJ Lang, and he was a heck of a player, 2-time Pro Bowler, he should have been the left tackle at Eastern Michigan University.
Yes.
What impresses me about Jordan Morgan is he played that position for parts of 5 years as a starter at Arizona, and he held that position. He said, this is a thing I've been dealing with. People ask about the short arms and all this stuff. He's like, they don't turn on the tape. They don't see how I use my body. They don't see how I use my athleticism, my skills. And obviously he has those big hands that Larry McCarron talked about. That was what stood out to me the most when I watched him. There is an explosivity out of him when he gets out of his stance. It wasn't flawless in terms of the minicamp. He did get pulled out of one drill for a false start. Everyone's a little bit anxious there that opening weekend.
Seen that happen to any number of rookie offensive linemen, and it'll happen in OTAs and training camp as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And you're gonna have those moments, especially when you're going up. They were going up against some veteran guys on the other side of it too that were coming back after being on the practice squad last year. So, be that as it may, I just feel like hearing him talk in the locker room on Friday, I was really impressed by him. I mean, he's not a guy that I think is gonna probably draw the most headlines. I think he's a very workmanlike, straightforward individual, extremely pleasant. It was great hearing him kind of give a little bit more detail into everything that went into his career at Arizona and tearing the ACL, and then also mentioning the first time he met Jordan Love, being frozen for a little bit, which I think probably makes you and I feel like the oldest people on earth, that Jordan Love is now at a point that people are like, oh my God, it's Jordan Love.
Right.
But all that together, he's a first-round pick. The Packers need options on that offensive line, and the competition's going to be great. Training camp is going to be so much fun on the offensive line with the 3 rookies they brought in. Kadeem Telfort was playing right tackle in the rookie camp. I think a lot of people, Mike, I keep saying this over and over again, Caleb Jones gets so much attention because he's 6'9". Luke Tenuta was a former draft pick. If those guys aren't around, Kadeem Telfort at 6'7" or whatever he goes at would probably get a lot more headlines too out of UAB on the practice squad all last year. Just a monstrous human being. And they're all in this thing. Yeah. Everybody's going to be competing for spots because, Jason Wilden's been asking about, you could pretty much set a starting lineup with what you have returning, and that's true. But where Green Bay's kind of lost something on the O-line is with the depth and being able to weather the injuries. And right now, Green Bay is looking to figure out who those individuals are and who could potentially fit in addition to Jordan Morgan saying, hey, I've been a lifelong left tackle. I want to play that spot in the NFL, and I want to do it for Jordan Love.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really interesting to me when you look at this Packers offensive line, because, yes, we had talked about it going into the draft. David Bakhtiari, John Runyon, Yosh Nijman, 3 guys who played a lot of football and a lot of good football for the Green Bay Packers were gone. You have to rebuild that depth. You've got to get the depth back in that room. But at the same time, if Caleb Jones makes the strides that they're hoping for heading into this year, if Kadeem Telfort makes those strides, if Luke Tenuta comes back from the injury that basically had him on the shelf all of last season, there's potentially a lot more to the Packers' depth on the offensive line than just the 3 draft picks that were selected a couple of weekends ago. So that's something to file away in the back of your mind because as I always say, if it comes down to it at the end of August and the Packers have 12 or 13 really, really good offensive linemen that they feel good about and they can only keep 10 of them, that's a heck of a good problem to have, right? Because you'd love to have all these guys prove that they are capable of being NFL players. You want to be comfortable with any of them being on the roster because you never know at any moment if somebody could go down with a sprained ankle or something worse than that. And that's how the Packers are going about it here on the offensive line in what is in some ways a rebuilding year in terms of the depth because of those veteran guys who left.
100%. And keep in mind, too, I mean, this isn't 2012 anymore. I think we've seen the last time the Packers go into a regular season with 7 offensive linemen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Especially now you have the 8th offensive lineman rule that if you have 8 active on game day, you get the extra spot on the game day roster. And more than anything, Mike, it's a 17-game regular season right now. And if I had to bet $1 to donuts, there's probably going to be an 18th game on the horizon. You're going to need offensive linemen. The Packers have been ahead of that curve. And I feel like for as many questions as people might have as far as what that group is going to look like week one when they go to Brazil, I think there's a lot of excitement too that in a lot of different ways you can't really go wrong in terms of the different machinations that are available with that that offensive line construct.
Yeah, when you talk about the day 3 draft picks on the offensive line, Jacob Monk and Travis Glover, not small individuals.
Not small.
Those guys are big.
Well, and they lost their backup center, right? I mean,
right.
John Runyon's gone. So if something happens, and we'll see how training camp looks, but like last year, when Josh Myers went out, that meant the starting right tackle had to go to center. That meant that Elton Jenkins could have to move from left guard to center. And we get back to that old conversation about if you're taking guys out of their primary positions, moving them elsewhere. You have a guy like Jacob Monk that proves he's ready for it, can plug them in right there in an instant. That's how guys find opportunities in this league.
Yeah, no doubt about it. One guy that we're getting asked about a lot in Insider Inbox, we haven't really mentioned him too much today, so before we go, wanted to get your thoughts, and I'm talking about the 7th round cornerback, Kalen King. I'm just gonna say this. I have a piece from the King's interview in the locker room on Friday before the first minicamp practice, working on a piece that's going to get posted, whether it's later this week, next week, not sure exactly yet. But I just hope, and I'm not one who likes to tell anybody how to do their jobs, but I just hope that the media corps here lets the whole 7th round thing go. Like, let the kid move on. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was an emotional conference call. It was a really, really rough 3 days for him. But I got the sense that he's ready to move on from it. That, yes, it's going to be part of his story, but he doesn't want that to be like the story that defines him as an NFL player. So let's see where this goes. Let's not continue to dwell on it and see what this young man does with the cleanest slate of clean slates, yeah. Right? When you're talking about a guy who almost doesn't get picked, is drafted with the 3rd to last selection in the entire draft, and now he's got an opportunity. And I'll have more in the story that'll be coming up on the website sometime in the next several days. But I just as I see Kalen King, I think, trying to put draft weekend behind him, I hope everybody else can too.
I think it's a really good point, Mike. And for me, there's no character issues here. There's no injury issues. There's really nothing else to hang on to other than the fact that, he got drafted 255th overall. Yeah, the true junior year didn't play out probably how he exactly wanted it to. But the rookie orientation camp, him working in the slot and the nickel, I think is going to be really intriguing to follow if we're just looking at him as a football player, because this is a guy that played against some really high-level talent in the Big Ten. And as much as people want to make a lot out of that Marvin Harrison Jr. game in Ohio State, they're kind of losing sight of everything he did his sophomore year and some of the upside he had. This is a guy that still was, I believe, third team All Big Ten last year. Yeah, he didn't run the 40 that everybody probably wanted him to, but if his 40 is actually more in that 4.55 range like it was at his pro day, I mean, that's a fine time to be able to manage the nickel, the dime, to work inside. And he has the body for it, too. This is not a small individual. He's got some thickness to him as well. It's going to be very intriguing to watch his story. I loved hearing about his competitive nature, how much is going to push him. I don't think those are just hollow words. I feel like it is something that is going to be generally true. Yeah. And again, the Packers, if you wanted to use one more analogy for that 7th round, guys get in here, man, they don't care anymore in terms of the coaching staff. If Rasheed Walker looks like he's going to play, he's going to play. Carrington Valentine was one of the most impressive rookies throughout the entire offseason program last year. Him ending up on the field, there was some bad luck with injuries and other things for Green Bay in the cornerback room, but he earned that opportunity. So I think that part of it is very interesting. I don't know if you're planning to transition anything else after this because I missed this in the pre-production notes, but I would like to say a couple words about Marshawn Lynch. Or Marshawn Lynch. Yeah, we can talk about Marshawn Lynch too.
Speaking of names that
I finally did it.
Speaking of names that we're going to botch somewhere along the line. No, I was just going to throw it back to you and ask if there was anything else from the rookie minicamp that we hadn't talked about yet that you would like to bring up.
Marshan Lloyd was one of the stars of Saturday's practice. I feel like if we would have had like availability, if this would have been like a training camp, everybody would have been gravitating to him afterwards. When you look at Friday, I think it was a little bit of a slow start. I think he might have had a drop in there, maybe a loose ball that got away from him. But they did some inside zone stuff. And again, it's non-contact. You're not tackling the running back. But Michael, I'm telling you, dude, when you talk about his short area quickness and his ability to kind of see through the mess, he does that. And his first step, once he puts his foot in the ground, he was able to move his way upfield, and it's difficult to corral him. I felt like, at 5'9", 220 pounds, he did some things out there that you don't see backs of that size do. And again, it's one practice. You got to put these things together. But my goodness, dude, some of the possibilities there of what he can do in the open field, as Adam Stenovich said, there's things you just want to see him just get the ball and see what he does.
Yeah.
And I felt like Saturday he definitely put his best foot forward and was one of the stars on the practice field.
I always think that's one of the things and it's more noticeable, I think, on the offensive side with the guys that get the ball in their hands as opposed to the defensive side. When you talk about guys being able to look like they're playing fast and not doing too much thinking.
Yes.
You notice that, our layman's eyes, we notice that the guys with the ball in their hands, and when you see those guys be able to make the shifts and the moves and all of that quickness, those natural running instincts start to come through, as opposed to thinking about the play and the playbook and what's my assignment and where am I supposed to fake this way to go that way before I get the handoff and all of that. When you can see that natural speed early, I think that's always a good sign for
Yeah,
the player.
absolutely. Packers did sign 3 guys after this off of the tryout. That was Julian Hicks, Lecitus Smith, who, by the way, now he's a former draft pick 2 years ago by Arizona. When we're talking about players that are vocal, Smith was vocal. Smith was very vocal. You can tell that he's a center. I don't know if I've ever heard that much talking in terms of verbalization in terms of the offensive front at a rookie minicamp before, which is what you would kind of expect from a second-year veteran. But then Dimitri Stanley. And I'm sure when we get to OTAs, this kid is going to be a story. His father is Walter Stanley. Obviously, you know his track record. Packer fans are well accustomed to it, older Packer fans.
Thanksgiving 1986, man.
Yeah.
The folks who saw it, like me, will never forget it.
234 all-purpose yards,
Something
game-winning
like that,
punt
yeah.
return for a touchdown.
Two receiving touchdowns and then a game-winning 83-yard punt return for a touchdown in the final minute to win a Thanksgiving shootout at the Pontiac Silverdome, 44-40. I just looked it up before the show.
Yeah.
I don't know all this off the top of my head, folks.
It wouldn't have surprised
40
me if you did, though.
Well, 44-40, I remembered. 83 yards, I had to look that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, Walter Stanley, man, a game for the ages on Thanksgiving, 1986.
So Dimitri Stanley, he ended up following his father's footsteps at Colorado. He had some injuries, he had some setbacks, and it is something that sort of followed him too at Iowa State. I think he ended up, what did he have at Iowa State? I want to look this up now. 70 catches for 820 yards, 4 touchdowns with Colorado, and then he ended up having an additional 48 catches for 559 yards and a touchdown in his 2 years in Ames. But what impressed me the most, Mike, he earned his roster spot. He did it with some of the one-handed snag that he had on Friday that caught Matt LaFleur's attention. And
yeah, we all saw that one, the one-handed grab by the
slick.
side. It was all the way on the other side of the field from where we were watching, but you couldn't miss it.
He was this close to having another one of those along the sideline on Saturday, right in front of all the reporters. I was standing there with Matt Schneidman, Bill Huber, and Rob Domofsky. I mean, I'm talking me to the camera, my one shot there. And he just wasn't able to bring it down when he was going to the ground, but it was a competitive play. It was in terms of a tryout player, it was the most impressed I was by a tryout player since Tyron Walker, which is over a decade ago, who ended up being one of the darlings of training camp, I think in 2012 or 13. He made himself undeniable, and excited to learn more about him. A cluttered position, especially with Alex Magoo in that room now too. But
yeah, no kidding.
You got to get your foot in the door if you're going to dance, and Dimitri Stanley did that this past weekend.
Yeah, well, there was an undrafted receiver from Iowa State who turned into a pretty good receiver for the Packers not that long ago as well. So you just never know.
Got to give him a chance.
Right? Absolutely. Well, with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team, everything from rookie minicamp, moving into OTAs in a couple weeks. We'll have draft pick follow-up stories, all that for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.